Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name's Campbell Phillips and I'm editor of Power Retail. Joining me today are Cassandra Reed Hamilton, Digital Director for Stonebridge Systems, and Dan Darnell, VP of Marketing and Product for Baynote, who have prepared an informative presentation on the state of play for online retail and behavioural recommendation technology. Before the presentation kicks off, I'd just like to point out to everyone that the scheduled time for the webinar is 1 hour. However, that will include some time for questions at the end. Please feel free to pose a question at any time with the questions interface of your GoToWebinar control panel. This webinar is also being recorded, so if you happen to miss anything or wish to share it with your colleagues, a link to the recording will be shared with you in the coming days. Without anything further, I'd like to invite Cassandra to begin her presentation.
Thank you very, very much, Campbell. It's really great pleasure to be here today. My name is Cassandra and I'm the Digital Director for an Australian-based company called Stonebridge Systems. We are an IT and digital services company. We drive digital strategies for large enterprise clients and we are expert in content delivery across the enterprise. Also joining me is Dan Darnell from Baynote. Baynote is a US-based company that delivers behavioural targeting software to personalise the consumer experience online. The format for today is that Dan and I will be speaking to you about online retail success for, I think, roughly 30 minutes or thereabouts before the question time that Campbell just mentioned as he made our introduction. To give you get started so you can see what's happening. To give you a bit of an overview of what we will present today, I'm going to have a look at the Australian online retail market, which I'm aware many of you will already be well versed in and have your own perspective on. But we will take a look at some competitive analysis and I will focus on some of the common governance and operational issues and challenges that require attention. Within that operating context, Dan will then talk to you specifically about the big data opportunity and present some case studies on how Baynote has made a significant impact on the uplift in conversion for a number of large corporate brands. Our aim today is to provide you with some actionable insights to take away and use to develop and improve your operations. So to kick off, the reality is that online retail is growing in Australia. It is a commonly held view that it was late to get started and we've lagged behind first movers in the US and in Europe. There are many reasons for this. However, the conditions are now right to support growth. And the question is, how are people going about this challenge? Improved connectivity and increased accessibility is fueling this growth. In the last year, statistics have showed us that 17.2 million Australians access the internet and spent an average of 38 hours online, which translates to more than 40 billion minutes online. So quite a significant, I suppose, increase year on year in the usage of internet in Australia. What we're also seeing, particularly from the Australian Shopping Behaviour Report, indicated that statistically Australians in 2013 still prefer to buy in store, but also that the NAB Online Retail Sales Index from 2013 as well showed a gradual and steady shift in Australia towards online retail spending, with a total spend of $14.7 billion in 2013. As a result, the process of online retail marketing is certainly a necessary consideration for modern retail companies, especially considering the constantly changing trends that exist, along with the effect of a globalised retail market. Some of the current trends that are affecting online retailers include the uptake of mobile, so the mobile consumer, seasonality, and second or omni-screen interactions. So consumers obviously now accessing the internet through websites, applications, mobile applications specifically, wearable devices, connected appliances, interactive displays, online communities, social networks. The 2013 Forrester report insists that it is integral to the success of an online retailer to provide a cohesive, consistent and seamless online experience for their customers across multiple channels. The challenge for retailers, such as yourselves, is to be able to communicate with customers in real time and to join the dots by providing a consistent message and access to products through multiple channels. The seasonality of products and marketing is also very important. For example, the Commonwealth Bank For example, the Commonwealth Bank experienced differential uplifts in the sale of particular products when they advertised at specific times across multiple channels. What was gained by that data was the Commonwealth Bank was able to pinpoint when and where to target their retail marketing in order to achieve increasingly successful results. Just as a kind of add-on there to add another level of detail, that we can see that there are now some standout successes among online retailers in Australia. Companies like Kogan, Catch of the Day, Booktopia, and we've also started to see some real successes for international retailers entering the Australian market. So ASOS as a standalone brand, and then also global omni-channel brands like Zara and Apple. An interesting figure to note is in 2013, and this statistic also comes from the NAB Online Retail Sales Index from their January in-depth report. In 2013, 74% of online retail spending in Australia occurred with local retailers. However, with the increasing or the growing entry into Australia by those international global retail brands, such as Uniqlo out of Japan, H&M in Sweden, and Miss Selfridge out of the UK, is that spend with local retail set to decrease in the coming years as competition increases in the Australian market more generally. In terms of governance and life cycle planning, I'm only going to speak for a few more slides before handing over to Dan. And for those few slides, in fact there are two more, I would like to focus on some of the setting some context for the presentation slides that Dan has for you. And I'd like to focus on what operational considerations you might want to review in preparing for industry growth. These include both your internal governance procedures and life cycle planning for your operations. With regard to your operations, the question is really, how does your current operations stack up within that context of the global online retail market? And how can you stand out particularly from your competitors in an increasingly competitive market? In order to establish your potential for e-commerce success, the first step is probably to map out where you stand in the global market. As a first measure, understand how you profile against the market. Are you a standalone online presence, large recognised brand with an omni-channel retail approach and the need to secure a large market share? It's important, really important, to distinguish as your competitors' strategies and scale of investment vary greatly between those two groups. As a follow-on, you'll need to analyse your current strategic approach and understand what room there is to reset your operating parameters. So this includes mapping out your resources, and by resources I mean your available budget, your staff, and also your tangible assets, the actual platform and the surrounding operations that go to make up your total operation. So to understand your resource and also your current approach internally to governance in order to discover your strengths and weaknesses. Some of the key things to consider when assessing your governance is that you need to determine which influences in your organisation you need at the table to make key decisions in order for you to have a supported framework for you to deliver your online retail experience. Some of the key things are: how will you measure trends that can be recognised by analysing your user data in order to manage the return on that overall operational investment, and what are the non-tangible benefits to your business, such as the creation of operational efficiencies that can be recognised by driving increased revenue online. This data can be reused to build business cases to support future investments, and you can support your decision makers by giving them options-based analysis and clear recommendations. When forming your goals for the direction of your business in the, say, maybe next 5 years, you will have to assess how much of your resource you're willing to allocate towards solutions and how you're going to implement your governance principles. This is the stage that requires a reassessment every 6 to 12 months, which forms the basis of a continuous improvement approach to your business as usual, your BAU operations, that can then be revisited every 6 to 12 months. Ultimately, though, research by Forrester suggests that even for online retailers with well-defined standards, a lack of business-wide governance processes lead to breakdown in communication between teams internally and result in a siloed effect, and thereby drastically affects the overall strategy of the business and the eventual success the businesses have in their interaction with customers. So so that's really about your consumer touch points. Once you have really mapped out some of the things I've mentioned on this slide, you should have a clear understanding of current business in the market and your goals and governance principles moving forward. Once you've set those elements in place, assuming that you haven't, and if you have, obviously you're well on the way to understanding what other operational considerations there are in order to increase your conversion rates and to increase your share of your specific competitive market. So once you've set in place an overview of your future goals, it's time to look at your internal operations. So life cycle planning refers to that process that I mentioned just a moment ago of implementing a practical problem-solving approach to the continuous improvement of your BAU operations. Take a look at your tools and your assets, your tangible and non-tangible, including hardware, application architecture and licenses. Be aware of both the capital and operational expenditures and the opportunities to look at cloud-based and subscription or SaaS models as appropriate to your financial priorities. And most importantly, take a look at your core platform. So what are the positive and negative aspects of your current platform? What are your competitors doing? What's the current core platform's life cycle? And when would you be willing to look at alternatives? What do you want to get out of the platform in terms of functionality and innovation for the money? What things, what tools and products, what add-ons do you need to have in order to meet your future goals? So again, that continuous improvement thinking, and who can help you understand those things? And those things are both those tactical and operational considerations as well as that broader strategic goal around business improvement. So once you've made assessment of those things, it's probably time to start actively planning for the next generation, I suppose. And I know that's the language that Dan uses too. What's your best case scenario for the next generation of your platform? So, for example, if you predict you've got 5 years left in your current core platform, but you're having issues with content management and customer engagement, you've got to start to consider what products and tools you need now to get you well down that road and to stay competitive in a rapidly competitive market. And so that's probably where solutions partners like Stonebridge, from a digital strategy point of view, can help, but also end suppliers like Dan from Baynote, who I'm going to hand over to now. Dan, I know that you've got a few things that you'd like to get through today, so I'm just going to hand straight over to you if that's okay.
Great, thanks, Cass. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone today about a couple key problems, or you could even view these as opportunities. I think it really depends on your perspective. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The first issue or problem or opportunity, depending on how you want to look at it, is big data. I think it's easy to think that you can hardly deal with the small data that you have, much less all this talk about big data. I think the great part about this is vendors and large global companies have really pioneered the use of this technology and brought it to market in such a way that now everyone can have the advantages of it. And even if you're kind of saying, well, I don't really need to use big data, I think unfortunately, the technology is there. Your customers and your competitors are not going to let you forget about that because it's going to power that next generation customer experience that they're going to come to expect. So what is big data? I mean, there's a lot of confusion in the market. I mean, I live this every day, so I guess I'm more immersed in the big data culture. But the term comes from just the massive volumes of information that we were collecting, and they simply had grown too large for the memory of the computers that were processing them. So engineers had to think of new ways of dealing with the data. And this is really just the origin of products like MapReduce from Google and Hadoop, its open source equivalent, and a number of other derivative products around them. These technologies allow us to manage, much larger sets of data than ever before, and really combine data in new ways. And while that mainstream concept of big data is driven by technology, the reality is that big data is more of a mindset. Big data, simply put, means looking at all the data and not having to leave anything behind. In addition, that data does not have to be neatly organized into rows and columns anymore, and it doesn't have to be perfectly clean to get great results. And this is a huge departure from where we were even a few years ago, where we had to think about, how do we take a subset of the data, how do we get a random sample of clean data in order to do certain operations. Nowadays, we can really take a look at all the data, looking at, weblog data, looking at data collected across channels, and all that data can come to bear to solve some really interesting problems. The other thing is, I think that's interesting is the big data mindset focuses on finding correlations in the data to drive new insights that we couldn't have seen before in our own kind of human scale with analytics or reporting, or with smaller data sets. So we should be looking for opportunities to solve some really cool problems with these new data sets. Which leads to that great question, what can I do with this data? In the retail world, we're using big data solutions every day as consumers, whether we know it or not. When you search on Google, you enter a search term, and the search engine seems to know what you're looking for and even helps you finish your search phrase. On Amazon and other sites, we see recommendations of products we might be interested in based on what other people have found useful. It may not even be based on my own behavior. And it seems almost magical that these sites could understand me and deliver relevant content, product recommendations, etc., to meet my needs. These solutions were not possible, frankly, before an age of big data. And for better or worse, Google and Amazon and others had to build their own technologies to solve these problems. And I think luckily for all of us, the technology has kind of trickled down to the point where we can all take advantage of it. So let me talk a little bit about what some of those advantages are. For retailers, using big data means transforming the customer experience and our mobile applications. And we'll talk about in the next problem why that is. Clearly customers expect a broad selection of fresh, new products, and that's led all of us to have larger catalogs, faster turnover, and a dramatic increase in complexity on our websites and our applications. The big data-driven customer experience allows shoppers to really cut through that clutter of large catalogs and expansive sites to find what they're looking for, like the perfect outfit or accessories, for example, with a very limited attention span. So I think that's another thing we have to recognize, is that consumers increasingly, and in the United States we especially see with millennials, they have a very short attention span for finding what they were looking for. If they don't find it on your site, they will quickly go to look for it somewhere else. And we know that when they don't quickly find what they're looking for, they're going to bounce off our site, abandon the site, abandon their cart, and generally drive all the bad metrics that we're all tracking, but we don't want to see growing. So why should we be looking at this? The real issue you should be thinking about is if you don't mind your customers, then someone else will. So let's go on to the next issue, Cass. So I think globalization and advances in technology, some of which we've just discussed, mean that an ocean no longer isolates you from large, hungry global competitors. And I think Cass touched on that earlier. I love the sandwich, by the way, which I think really represents what they're coming to eat. That being said, I think consumers prefer their known brands that they've always done business with, at least until new brands have an opportunity to come win them over. I think this means that there's a window of opportunity where it's kind of unique right now. You have the opportunity to take advantage of the technologies that these large global companies have pioneered and use them for your own benefit before those same companies can come and eat your lunch. I think of this as becoming, that transformation you can read about in Forrester and other places of transforming your brand from a product-centric company into a customer-centric company. And that means really putting yourself in your customer's shoes. What do they need to be successful, and what kind of experiences do they like, for example? First of all, we need to deliver a cohesive experience to consumers across devices and touch points. That doesn't mean you have one experience. It means that when someone uses our mobile application, they're not getting a completely different view of our products or our brand as when they come into our stores. It means we need to have an idea of how to create a seamless experience that consumers will enjoy across different devices and touch points. It also means we have to offer a relevant, personalized experience no matter how the consumer chooses to interact. This is what consumers expect from dealing with leading retailers and global brands, and that kind of rubs off, and it means that all of us have to have those kinds of features and functionality to compete. When we provide a relevant, personalized experience, we not only increase the metrics we care about, like conversion rate and average order value and total revenue, which we'll talk about next, but we have a real chance to increase the number of repeat visitors and improve our overall customer lifetime value. It's really a win-win for everyone involved. So let's go ahead and look at some case studies. I think these companies really showcase how you can successfully use personalization to drive real improvement in your business. Let's go ahead into the next slide. First case study is 3M. I think hopefully everybody knows 3M. They're one of the world's largest and most innovative companies, and they bring us products from brands like Scotch, Post-it, and Nextcare. I mean, who hasn't used Scotch tape or Post-it notes around the office or at home? Shop 3M, which is their store, enables consumers and businesses to purchase products directly from 3M. To bring the site up to par with other retail sites, 3M had to redesign the shop.com, the Shop 3M experience, and add features like personalized product recommendations. And they did that throughout the Shop 3M experience, as well as adding them to the 3M global website. If you go in there and go to the Americas website, you'll see recommendations right on the 3M website. Now, the goal of 3M is not just, Shop 3M is not just sales. Shop 3M helps them introduce customers to new products, can help them test new product introductions before rolling them out to their channel. Shop 3M can also sell lower volume items that the consumer might not be able to find in stores or other online shops. And that's important because with a recommendation technology, it needs to be able to handle all those different situations. These could be lower volume products, you can't do that with manual recommendations. You can't manually set these things up because it just requires too much hands-on time from people who you pay too much to. So in order to get the most out of that, you need to automate it and allow a system to manage that for you. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide and talk about their results. I think this is a great case study, by the way, as well, because this was a company that really needed to leapfrog into a modern shopping experience on their site, and we were able to help them do that. So after implementing relevant personalized recommendations as part of an overall site redesign, they were able to increase revenue by 62%. And Baynote was able to help them by driving higher conversion rates. People who use personalized relevant recommendations on the site convert at 615% over people who don't. So people who use recommendations and a personalized experience are much more likely to buy during that session. We're also able to increase things like average order values by actively cross-selling and upselling people during their site experience. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next case study. A brand you may not be familiar with is Netshoes. Netshoes is the largest online sporting goods retailer in Brazil, with over 7.5 million unique monthly visitors. And this is a big site. It gets a lot of traffic, and it's one of Brazil's top online retail companies. Their challenge really was that the category and brand management teams tried to implement manual recommendations on the site with limited success. And I think the challenge that you'll have anytime you try that is you'll always end up merchandising and managing your highest volume products where most of your revenue comes from, and you'll have to forget about everything else. They realized pretty quickly with a rapidly expanding catalog and rapid turnover from all their brands that they would need to create an automated system to deliver personalized recommendations across the site. And I think the results speak for themselves. Personalized recommendations in this case, you can go ahead to the next slide, Cass. personalized recommendations in this case are driving 25% of the site's revenues, with conversion rate for recommendations users of double that of standard users, and significant increases in average order value as well. And you might be wondering, how that works. Well, when you have a good system for this, it means that you can really actively upsell people to a more expensive option. And the other great thing that happens is you have the ability to actively accessorize products that people are buying. And that can dramatically improve the average order value by moving you from maybe 1 item per cart to 2 or 3 items per cart. So with that, Cass, I'm going to pass it back to you to kind of wrap up.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. I think we're doing remarkably well, given that we're not in the same room. I'd like to just, in summary, say that we'd like to leave you with some ideas about how to prioritise success for your businesses this year in 2014. It's achieving that success this year it's going to be a complex business, and there are multiple variables at the strategic, operational, and levels. It will take exceptional strategy coupled with the integration of the right enterprise software. While every retailer's online presence is unique, there are some commonalities or some key ingredients that you have to get right. Some of the considerations that we think are the standout considerations for this year are about understanding how to leverage your data and do the right analysis of that data. And this really flows on from Dan's presentation. So the basic concept is to be proactive and not reactive. Take the time to analyse your current data, what it's showing you about your consumer experience, and what it's going to provide to you to help you continuously improve your digital strategy. Having just listened to Dan, I think one of the things that really stood out for me is that understanding your data will help to shed some light on the increasingly complex shopper experience that we're facing, having to cater for this year, and also understanding that consumer mindset. So particularly those short attention spans, so that if you've got a site that's not easily navigable or intuitive to use, then the chances are you'll lose that sale. You need to align your business strategy with your online solutions and the customer experience. So having that digital strategy that you can continuously improve in place is important. But who you partner with, and partnering with the right companies, the right services people, but as well as that, the software providers, I suppose, like Baynote, that actually are really on the money in terms of what's going on in the global market, and understanding who their competitors are and what the differences between those products are. We are constantly speaking with our clients about how a product like Baynote stacks up against, for example, products that might already be inbuilt into some content management systems. In terms of global reach and visibility, managing your company's brand and the content is crucial to understanding shopper needs or customer needs and changing market trends, so you are able to adapt quickly. Brand management, in an age where so much of the control of the brand has been handed over to the consumer, and we've seen that we're now many years into that space, I suppose. So understanding where you can and can't control your brand and how to leverage the content within that to promote trust in your brands is pretty important. And on top of that, I would say that content management and the data that underpins that content is integral as well. So harnessing, I guess, delivering the right content to the right people at the right time, whether that's based on your catalogue or based on your brand, your branded content that strengthens the brand experience for the consumer. They're the kinds of key things that we think are going to get more and more refined during this year, and the software to support that is becoming increasingly sophisticated in the market. So with that, I'd probably like to say thanks for taking the time to listen to what we've had to say today. Dan and I are happy to answer any questions you may have. there's a bit of an overview for everyone of Stonebridge and who we are. We've got offices in Sydney and Melbourne, and obviously you can reach us online, and some of our customers. We're not. It's probably important to distinguish between a company like Stonebridge, who provides services delivery around a number, and we're quite product and platform agnostic in that endeavour, because we're really interested in driving digital strategy to further a client's business aims, and Baynote, who are a niche software provider, and we partner with them in the Australian market. So that should clarify who both Dan and I are, and the roles we're coming from in speaking to you today. That's it for me. I'll probably hand over. I might need some. I think Campbell said at the start that we could take questions via the chat window. I'm not sure if anyone has a question for us, but we'll hold on for a couple of minutes and see if anything comes through.
Hi there, Cassandra. I'm back on, and yes, we're certainly taking questions through the question interface, which everyone will find at the bottom of their GoToWebinar control panel. There's been a couple come through already, but whilst a few of the attendees are probably still mulling over further questions, I had one of my own, and I might actually hand that to Dan. I wanted to ask a little bit more about, I guess a big problem for a lot of retailers is who should actually be tasked with managing these kinds of processes and technologies like behavioural recommendations within a larger retail organisation. Is that something that a marketing expert would take care of? What are your thoughts,
It's a good
Dan?
question. It's a good question. We see a lot of different people kind of owning the recommendations within various companies. When you think about what you're trying to do on the website, it really falls into an online merchandising role, because the role of an online merchandiser is to really showcase and reveal products in an attractive way on the retail website. And a big part of what you're doing with product recommendations is showcasing products that are relevant or related as part of that consumer's experience. So I would encourage people to be talking to merchandising teams, brand management teams. If there's brand managers or category managers, those are the kind of people who ultimately should be working on this. Now, that being said, a lot of times organizations will have a separate or a team that works with the merchandising team to take the strategies that they want to deploy and to manage those on the site. And that has to do a lot with just having someone who has the time and the skills to manage the on-site merchandising tools. That being said, I think we've made a lot of progress there in making the tools such that business users can make changes and promote them directly to the live website.
Well, fantastic.
So,
And sorry, Cassandra,
Campbell,
you
I
go
would
on.
just make a remark about that, if that's all right, which
Sure.
is one of the things that's clear is that the Australian market from a skills point of view is further behind probably the US and certainly Europe. We saw that a lot of digital agencies here as service providers skilled up in the last few years around the data analyst piece, and that was, I guess, the preceding skill set that was recognised as necessary to be able to deliver on customer requirements or client requirements, depending on the size of the account. I think it's really, we know that there's a digital skills shortage at the moment in Australia, and some of these really niche roles are often very hard to find. They need to develop often out of existing teams, and they take a very particular skill set in terms of what we saw a few years ago is a lot of people with statistics degrees were going out and getting data analyst jobs. So that is shifting again, and I would agree with Dan wholeheartedly around looking at what your merchandising people are doing, and as well as that your product marketers and your brand managers.
Well, fantastic.
Yeah, we see that role, by the way, we see that under customer experience, we see that under product management, we see that under merchandising, as well as just the e-commerce organization in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, there's been another question come through from Michelle, who's interested in finding out a little bit more about Baynote specifically. Now, Dan, I'm assuming Baynote's not the only behavior targeting personalization software on the market. Um, what are the differences? What should retailers be looking for when they're thinking about partnering with that kind of solution?
Yeah, I think there are some clear reasons why people choose to work with us. And it, of course, has to do with technology. There are differences in our technology versus other folks. We started out as an on-site search technology and have continued to utilize search terms as a core part of our offering, which means we can really respond to the intent of the visitor as they come in. So we're not just watching, click behavior. We're watching, what people are searching on, and we're able to match up products with what they're looking for. Similarly, we're on the technology side. We've always focused on engagement over some other things that you could look at, like purchases. Um, Using something like engagement means that we can look at every visitor and their interactions and put that into kind of the big data repository and analyze that along with everyone else. And we're not just relegated to purchase data or click data alone. On another note, I think another key reason why people like to work with Baynote is just our experience in the market. And one of the things, having over 350 sites that we work with, including some, large global brands and a lot of even smaller companies, is we bring that experience to our partners like Stonebridge and help to make sure that our clients are going to be successful with the products. So those are some clear reasons why someone would want to work with an experienced partner, like a Baynote. I think the last thing, and I think one thing that people really like about Baynote is that we are a science-based company. There's certainly a lot of folks out there who can do something like product recommendations, but we have our own data science team, and as an innovator in the space, have really helped to pioneer the technologies that people are using today and continuing to innovate and deliver new algorithms to get even more lift for our clients every year.
Well, that's great. Dan, that's a thorough answer. Thank you very much. We had another question earlier, and this one might be for Cassandra. You mentioned earlier seasonality and how that can affect behavioral recommendations. We had a question from Devangi, and Devangi's just asking if you could go into seasonality and how that fits into the broader picture in any more detail.
Yeah, sure. Look, seasonality of products and marketing is important. I think earlier I gave the Commonwealth Bank experience. There's two ways to think about seasonality. One is time of mind, or the mind share of a potential conversion or that shopper, depending on the time of year. So how, in terms of revenue and converting sales online, what do you look at when you look at your data across the year and see when your peak times are? We've got a couple of massive boom periods in the Australian market. And the other way to think about seasonality, I guess, from a time-based point of view, is when we're talking about that omni screen or the second screen experience, so that when someone is, and the evidence from that Commonwealth Bank example is about how do we take from the data in terms of looking at what time did we convert and how does that align with other marketing initiatives like your advertising, like TVCs in the instance of the CommBank. So it's really about understanding what's your user's journey, what devices are they on, when are they making that conversion decision, and when they're making that decision, what time of year is it and what time of day is it, and really what are the marketing efforts around those times, and how can you optimize those to try and encourage that conversion actually happens. So there's quite a lot of research on that sort of stuff. So if you're interested in further reading, let me know.
Fantastic. And we've actually had a couple of questions along similar lines, and these are a slightly broader focus, so I'm not sure who would be better to answer. Either one of you feel free to jump in here, but I guess it relates to integration and how behavioral recommendation can fit in as part of the larger e-commerce platform. Anthony, in particular, says he's had a lot of problem finding the right uh, web developers, the right graphic designers, and it's all a bit of a minefield of unreliability. In particular, when trying to get advice on what elements to integrate to the homepage, such as social networks. I'm sure those networks themselves can be very useful for data when it comes to behavioral recommendation. Maybe Dan, do you have any opinions on who to go for the right advice on these sorts of topics, and where exactly behavioral recommendation comes into the picture?
Well, a couple things there. One thing that came to mind is I think in that situation, especially if you're having trouble finding resources, you need to let other folks do some of the heavy lifting. And whoever you choose to work with, your partners there should be able to do a lot of that work for you. We integrate with on a variety of levels. We can integrate with at the browser level through a JavaScript integration, for example. And once that's set up, really not worried about that happening anymore. Very little work for the teams at the retailer site. But we also integrate more deeply with the site experience. And I think this goes to our point earlier that as you're thinking about that next generation site experience, you also have to think about what you're going to take ownership of in terms of delivering that site experience. And in that case, you can integrate with a technology like ours via a server call or a REST-based integration and get a deeper level of integration with the site experience. A couple advantages to that are when you integrate at the server level, the content's rendered for and it's readable for SEO purposes. So the relevant products you're posting to the page, then Google or other search engines can read those and say, oh, this page is about this type of topic. So there's a variety of ways you can integrate and deal with the resource limitation around that. We have customers who are up and live, and I mean 3M was a great example where it took less than 30 days. And for a company like 3M, that was pretty astounding for them. We have customers who are live in as few as 12 days. So this obviously isn't the kind of mind-numbing process that some people think it is. It's actually relatively straightforward, especially when you're working with somebody who's done it a lot of times before.
So my follow-up, I guess, in support of what Dan's saying would be around troubleshooting some of those problems. There are multiple complex problems when it comes to architecting your platform. Baynote is one of many kind of products that can support an e-commerce effort. I think my response from an operational point of view, because that's really my domain, is to invest in your people. And if you don't have the funds to invest in people, you need to take a step back from that and educate your internal influencers. So how do you influence them to understand the specialist skills required? So in terms of building a site that's got an intuitive and easily navigable interface, there is a bunch of specialist skill sets that contribute to that outcome, and they are people like information architects. They are, I guess, they're user journey planners. They're people that do research and market analysis and can look at what competitors are doing. And really, I'd agree with Dan. You need to lean on if you don't have the funds to fund the building of that internal expertise or building that team internally, then I would strongly suggest finding people who have done it before and can do the heavy lifting for you. And that's not in any way, that's actually just based on my experience, that if you start, and be very, very careful about who you select to bring on board in your team and make sure that they have done it before.
And just going back to seasonality, we've had Mark comment that with seasonality, particularly in apparel, they're planning out their ranges and obviously buying for those ranges, budgeting for those ranges, I should say, several months ahead of time. So how can they be incorporating those buying decisions into optimizing the merchandise experience? How with such a time lag, how does these sorts of technology solutions actually help?
I'll pass that one to you, Dan, because I think that's probably
yeah, a couple.
best.
It's interesting. A couple things I can think of there. One, a technology like ours helps our customers understand what people are generally looking for um, before, sometimes before the brands have those things to offer. And we typically see that, and because we're observing every customer that comes through, and we see what search terms they enter, for example, and we can tell you when people are entering search terms and they're not finding the apparel items, colors, or things like that that they might be looking for. So in that way, we can help to inform the process that you're going through in terms of figuring out what your next style might be. But I think probably more relevant to that question is these are real-time technologies, and they're self-learning. So as you come out with new seasonal apparel offerings, the advantage of a machine learning automated system is it's very quickly going to pick up those new products, and you can actually tell the system, initially that you'd like it to boost those new items to get experience with them more quickly, so that they can kind of get into rotation as part of your merchandising efforts. So the technology is there to really help, with new products and getting them into the system.
Fantastic, Dan. Well, thanks for that answer. We've had a few general questions, so I'm thinking that some of these might be best to be referred directly to you after the webinar. You've also addressed a number of the questions based on your integration capabilities, but was there anything else, Dan, for you to mention there in terms of what Baynote's limitations are in terms of what it can actually be integrated into?
No, I mean, Baynote, I think it's important to understand as a personalization provider, we're not an e-commerce platform. We're not an email provider. We're not we don't have to provide a search engine. What we do need to be able to do is pretty much universally be able to integrate with those technologies, whatever they may be. And, working with over 350 sites, and we've integrated and seen just about everything. So I think that's an important distinction, that we kind of have to be generalizable enough to be able to integrate with just about anything, anywhere.
Well, fantastic. And unless there's any last minute questions come through, I'm just having a quick look here. No, it looks like we've pretty much covered it. As I've said, everyone, if you do have further questions, I'm sure Stonebridge and Baynote will be in touch once we've got this recording rendered for you. And that will give you a great opportunity to ask anything specifically that you might not have felt comfortable or that we didn't get to today. Otherwise, I'd like to thank our two presenters, Cassandra and Dan, for the fantastic presentation they put together for us. And certainly looking forward to seeing where behavioural recommendation can take us in future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Campbell.
Thanks all.